Hi, thank you for joining me in the Louie file today. All right, this is I guess it's sort of a part two. If you want to see the first part, you'll have to look at the Louie file, and it's called Falling Man, where I talked about the early chapters of Genesis and the fall of man and how it's really a three-part fall. It's the fall from the garden in Eden, and then it's a rebellion of some sons of God, mysterious sons of God, who procreated with the daughters of men and produced a giant race of Nephilim, which ended up bringing about God's decision to flood the earth. Then in Genesis 11, we see a tower built called the Tower of Babel, and all of this is really rebellion and disobedience, because God's plan originally was, in Genesis 1:26 and 27, he says, let us make man in our own image and let them have dominion of the earth, let them fill it and have dominion. So the idea is that God creates man in his image, and that his image would fill the earth, his glory, and subsequently I think what it's saying is that God intended for Eden to be worldwide, this idyllic setting with God and man in fellowship and in oneness. So we see that the fall of man was a process of a couple of rebellions. But what I wanted to bring up today is this us. Who is this us? In Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our own image. In Genesis 11:7, let us go down and confuse their languages, because of the Tower of Babel. And then in Isaiah 6 verse 8, he says, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Now, naively, I used to always just assume this was talking about the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. They're all saying, let us, collectively, as us three, do these things, and who will do this for us? And I'm not saying that God the Father, Son, and Spirit aren't part of this equation, but I think this us may include other divine beings. Now, most people that are Bible students, or even some that aren't Bible students, they would say, oh, well, yes, Louie, there's angels and there's demons and there's good and bad entities. But what if it's not just angels in the kind of generic sense of the word? The Bible uses the word Elohim lots of times. Depending on the context, sometimes the word Elohim can be translated, and is translated, angels. For instance, in Psalm 8, it says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? And it says, you have made him a little lower than the, and then depending on your translation, it might say a little lower than the angels. And then some translations say a little lower than God. One term that I have really come to like is heavenly beings. So it could be, you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings. Now, ultimately, the word Elohim is probably defined best as a heavenly being. In other words, a non-bodied, or not a physical material body per se. So angels, demons, evil spirits, sons of God, God himself. Now, here's the key. Yahweh is the name of the one true God. He's the name of the Creator God, the God of all gods, the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the King of kings. Beside him there is no other. He is the God. And Yahweh is an Elohim. He's a heavenly being. Now, angels, demonic spirits, sons of God, these other beings that we're talking about and we see in the scriptures, they would also be Elohim, but they are not Yahweh. I hope that helps you. So if you would, look with me in Psalm 82, whereas we're going to jump to Psalm 82 right now, and I'm going to show you something here. It's amazing. I'm going to read this whole psalm. It's 8 verses, and then I'm going to point out a couple of particular verses. And I'm going to read this in the New American Standard, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you a couple of words that may be translated differently to make this point. All right, so it says, God takes his stand in his own congregation. He judges in the midst of the rulers. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Vindicate the weak and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and destitute. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High God, or Most High, Nevertheless, you will die like men, and fall like any one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for it is you who possesses all the nations. Oh my. So, look back again here. The first verse says God takes his stand in his own congregation. This congregation could also be divine assembly. And then he says he judges in the midst of the rulers. Well, this word rulers can actually be translated gods. So what he's saying is Yahweh, God himself, he stands in the midst of the divine assembly. He stands in the midst of these gods. Midst implies there's more than one. He's calling them gods. Now this is a small g. The idea here is, like the sons of God in Genesis 6, they are not Yahweh, but they are still Elohim. They're still heavenly beings. Now this is implying that there is a no better term than divine counsel. There is God, Yahweh, and then there's several, maybe many, other lesser Elohims, little lowercase g gods, in this assembly. Now, if you have seen the previous video, the falling man, you'll know that back in Deuteronomy 32, there is Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, which is pointing back to Babel, where God says, let us go down and confuse their language. And he spread the people out all over the earth. And it says in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, is an old translation. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. So the idea here is that God had put the people, scattered them all over the world, or all over the nations known at that time, and he put them under the authority or jurisdiction of these lesser Elohim, these sons of God, these lowercase g gods. I hate to have to keep saying it, but I want to make sure this is clear to you. And there's an assembly taking place. In Psalm 82, it sounds as though there is a plea here for Yahweh to judge these sons of God and to take care of the nations which they are not caring for. So in Psalm 82, he says, verse 2, how long will you judge unjustly? See, Yahweh is declaring this to these lesser gods. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? See, they became selfish and self-centered. It appears as though these little g gods, these little Elohim, had started to convince, or they had deceived the people of the nations, the Gentile people, into worshiping them. Now, all through the Old Testament, we see where Yahweh God, Israel's God, tells them not to get mixed up with those nations. And don't let your sons and daughters marry into their families. Don't intermingle with them. And the reason is because he doesn't want them deceived. He doesn't want them being partakers with the wrong spirit. What fellowship does light have with darkness? Right? That's what Paul goes on to tell us in the New Testament. And the idea here is that if your sons and daughters intermarry with them, they're going to be led astray into a deception. They're going to be led under the power and influence of these other gods. So then he cries out, Psalm 82:3, vindicate the weak and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and destitute. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. The idea here is that God is ruling his universe through this council. He has delegated authority to these other Elohims. Now, this may sound shocking or unusual to you, but I hope that you would stick around, because it's kind of hard to swallow at first when you don't see it. But I'm going to show you in the next few videos, I hope, enough to convince you that this is so. So he's pleading with Yahweh to straighten the thing out, straighten this out. This divine council of other gods was meant to be overseers of these other nations, and part of what they were told to do, according to this, is that they should have taken up for the weak. They should have, the weak and fatherless. You know, it's interesting because in James, the letter James wrote in the New Testament says, pure religion and undefiled is this, that you care for widows and orphans, and keep oneself unspotted from the world. So the idea here is that God's plan all along is to delegate authority to others that will in turn take care of the needy and the weak and the powerless, and that they will judge justly among the peoples. And then in Psalm 82:5, they do not know nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. Wow. Nevertheless, you will die like men and fall like any one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for it is you who possesses all the nations. He's hearkening to Yahweh, and he's saying, all these nations have been given these other gods have been given delegated authority over these nations, but you, Yahweh, the one true God, the Most High God, you are really the ruler, and they are really your possession. Stand up. We're pleading with you to override them, override their power that you have given them. That's so great. Now, let me give you a couple of other little examples here. Look with me in Job. I think that's to your left if you're in Psalms. Yep, Job. Look back in Job chapter 1. And we got verse 6 through 12. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming about on the earth and walking around on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. Then Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You bless the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face. Then the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not put forth your hand on him. So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. Wow, so we have another divine council meeting, a divine assembly. And God points Job out to this Satan character, and he says, go and give him a good go at it. So God is giving him a certain level of authority in Job's life. Isn't that something? But we see the sons of God and Satan. See, it's not just God, like Father, Son, and Spirit, and Satan. Sometimes we get caught up in this idea, and it's really dualism, as if there's God and there's Satan, and that's it. Well, there's a myriad of other Elohims, other beings here that we're dealing with. Look ahead in Job 38. I'm going kind of quick here, but that's the beauty of this being video, and you can go back and watch it and pause it. Job 38, verse 4 through 7. Job is now in the docket on trial. God says, let me ask you something here. Job 38, 4 through 7. God says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who sets its measurements? Since you know, or who stretched out the line on it? On what were its bases sunk, or what laid its cornerstone? Listen to this. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, a lot of people try to translate this term, sons of God, and all this, like in Psalm 82, and even here. They're trying to say it's the Jewish leaders and all this stuff. Well, it makes no sense. These sons of God were there at the creation, at the foundation of the world. These sons of God are not earthly rulers. So, now we have another story of another divine council meeting. Look in 1 Kings 22. I don't want to read all this, but it's 1 Kings 22. This whole chapter is quite amazing, but it's about the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, and they're planning on going into this battle, and so they call these prophets, and these prophets just tell the king what he wants to hear. And there's another prophet, Micah, I think's his name, and the king's like, come on, man, he never tells me what I want to hear. But that's a good thing because he's telling him the truth. So Micah is summoned, and so the king asked him, tell me something. Tell me what's going to happen. So in 1 Kings 22:19, I'm just going to read a few verses here. Micah said, "Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and on his left." How about that? The host of heaven. It's a group on his right and left. The Lord said, "Who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" Now see, God is wanting to judge Ahab, so he's coming up with a way to do this, and he's doing it through this council meeting. And one said this, while another said that. So in the midst of this heavenly host, there's a lot of opinions going around. And Micah, the prophet, was able to see it. So he's translating this to the king. It says in verse 21, "Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him." The Lord said to him, "How?" And he said, "I will go out and be a deceiving or lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." Then he said, "You are to entice him and also prevail. Go and do so. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and the Lord has proclaimed disaster against you." Oh my gosh. So God has convenient agents to do his bidding. God is not a liar, but he has set up this whole thing that for whatever reason, he's the divine, he's the one, he gets to pick, and he's God, and he can do whatever he wants to do as God, but he has chosen to rule things in the way of a council, by way of delegated authority. We see this is kind of a strange way of putting it, but we see this in the unseen realm because we see these sons of God ruling the nations. We can't see them with these eyes, but we know that this is true based on the scriptures. And then we also see that God originally gave Adam, man, the earth to rule. So what really happened at the fall of man, to me, with the serpent deceiving Eve and then finding Adam in agreement with him, it seems to me that God's plan was for man to be part of his divine council in co-ruling with him. But the serpent, one of these sons or shiny ones or sons of God, it's an amazing thing to dig into. And I would advise you do that on your own for more details. But it seems that maybe they didn't want man in this divine council. So they tricked him out of his authority in the earth. Quite a sinister plot, and it really did take place, obviously. So, but in 1 Kings 22, God's council meeting comes up. They come up with a plan that this one spirit would be a deceiving, lying spirit in the mouth of the king's prophets, which eventually led to his being killed on the battlefield. So the question is, in the Old Testament, we have all these idols. These nations have all these idols and images in the form of birds and serpents and four-footed beasts and all kinds of things. Are they just stone and wood carvings, or is there more to it? Look in Psalm 97. Psalm 97, verse 9. It says, "For you are the Lord most high over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods." Look back with me in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 32, verse 17 and 18. This one's pretty clear. He's given a warning here. Look at Deuteronomy 32, 17 and 18. It says, "They sacrificed to demons who were not God, to gods whom they have not known, new gods who came lately, whom your fathers did not dread. You neglected the rock who begot you, and forgot the God who gave you birth." Oh my gosh. So then back up to Deuteronomy 4. Deuteronomy 4, 19 and 20. Look at what it says. It says, "And beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven." Wow. "But the Lord has taken you, and brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own possession, as today. And then I'll bring one more thing to your attention that is just a screaming obvious one. Exodus 20 verse 3, the very first of the 10 commandments. You know what it is? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now why would that be one of the 10 commandments if it's simply wood and stone? Because it isn't. There's something more going on here, something more devilish, something more sinister. And God is warning us throughout the whole of the scripture to not be taken in by these deceiving spirits, not to be misled or tricked. So anyway, this is plenty of food for thought for you today, and I hope this is bringing some clarity, and we're going to keep on this path in the next video, so I hope you join me then. Thank you so much for watching the Louie File.